Okay, so all the details been rescribed, the tail parts have been added. You can see where I've primed these after filling and sanding, just to check how my sanding has gone. Now what I've found is that on one of the tail planes is fine, but on this one here, on this outer part here, there's a little bit of unevenness on this one. Now because I need to fill that, but it doesn't require any sanding or finishing. Sorry, it doesn't require any rescribing around that area. So for that, I'm happy to use a filler that I'll let dry overnight and just quickly sand out in the morning. So I'm going to be using Tamiya's basic putty for that. It's the grey stuff. It's the best one of these quick, you know, solvent-based putties I've ever used. So it's just a case of getting a little bit onto the blade there, and then just working it into the area where it needs to be. Like so, and then just letting it dry for a few hours. As I said here, I'll let this one dry overnight. Okay, so hopefully you can see where I've filled that. Just let me clean that knife blade off a second with a bit of cellulose thinner on some towel, just so I can use that blade again for applying filler and the like. So as I said, that I'll fill and sand tomorrow and polish all that out. So we're down to the part now where we can start adding some of the smaller details to the model. So what I want to add now is the radiator fairings, which go on the sides of the booms here on each side. So there's a grand total of 4 of those. They're on the sprues here. As best I can see, they're completely symmetrical, so I'm happy to use any given one for any point here. So it's just a case of removing them from the sprue, trimming, ready for installation. Now there's intake and exhaust, or inlet and outlet grills that need to be added. I've added these days ago to these, painted the insides black because you're not going to be able to see any of that. And so we're ready to start gluing them onto the model. I'm doing an RAF one from this model, so I've just painted the area that will be very visible on the model dark earth, just for the sake of continuity. I'm just removing some paint from the mating surfaces, and then we'll try one of the those for fit, and it's actually a pretty good fit. There's some very minor trimming needs doing in terms of where those inner grills and meshes have gone, so I'm just going to sand them back a little bit like so with a rough sanding stick until the entire thing is flat, level and smooth. So it's like so. Just deburr the edges there, so there's nothing inside. And check the fit again, and that all looks like a pretty good fit to me. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to use standard Humbrol liquid poly for this job. So just going to use this to find a small brush to apply the liquid poly with. And that brush looks like it'll be fine. So all I'm doing is I'm just going to just put a tiny little bit of liquid poly with this fine brush along each of the joining edges. Okay, and pop that into place like so. Make sure we're lined up as best we can be. So it is going to require a very little bit of sanding when we're done, and once I've got that more or less lined up, okay, all I'm going to do is just run some more liquid cement into the joins there, and then check that it's in place. Now there are some very minor fit issues with these. They are really terribly minor. I've made sure I've translated them all to the lower side, which is less visible on the finished model. They will need dealing with when the model's done, but really it's minor stuff. So just check your alignment. Like I said, we're looking at getting the top part as best we can, so we're going to need some minor sanding on this, and that's that. So what I've got to do now is I've got to move across this, doing it to all four, which won't be that much work, so I'll see you when they're all done. Okay, so here we are again. Since the last time I was with you, I've added some of the other parts to this model. I've dealt with the small fit issue around the tail here. I've added the radiator parts to the rear of the tail booms, and filled and blended them. They weren't a bad fit at all really in reality, but there was a little bit of filling and sanding needed, which you can probably just see there. And I've also added the air intakes over the top of the booms here. So what I want to do now is I'm about ready now, because the airframe is largely together. So what I want to do is give the model a coat of primer before I move on to seeing if there's anything else that needs, any other rescribing needs doing, any fit issues it throws up, that sort of thing. So I need to give it a coat of primer, but before we do that, what I want to do is just give the model a quick wipe over to clean it and get all the any dust and grease and stuff off of it. So for that, what I'm going to use is this stuff here, isopropanol. It's neat alcohol. It evaporates quickly, but it removes. It's a great cleaner for your models. So I've just tipped a bit into the lid there, and I'm soaking a piece of kitchen towel with it, and just giving the model a good wipe over to make sure I remove any dust or greasy finger marks or anything like that. Although this is just alcohol, it is quite strong. It won't ever touch the plastic, but it can affect quite a lot of paints, even up to, this is such strong alcohol that it will actually affect dried enamel paint, and to a degree some of the Japanese lacquers. So as you can see, I'm just giving the model a decent wipe over. Okay, make sure that we're ready to give it an initial coat of primer to check for fit issues and all that sort of thing. So that's all I wanted to do there. So I'm happy with that. That's dried, and all the excess has evaporated off already. So one of the things that we need to do before we think about spraying some primer on is just I want to mask the canopy off there. So I'm just going to cut some tape up and use it to mask off our canopy. You don't have to be too precise here, because before we actually get to the real painting, I will be adding the actual canopy itself and finishing off the interior and stuff like that. So this is just a case of getting some of this to stop stop paint intruding too far onto the interior. You can touch stuff up later without any trouble at all. So this is really just a rough and ready quick job to allow us to get on to priming. And that is pretty much, that's as simple as that. Look, you can see I've just roughly put some masking tape over the cockpit opening to block it off while we spray the coat of primer. I'm just going to bring over a piece of, want a bit more kitchen towel than that really, so let's just push all that off of there. Fold up some kitchen towel like that, and we're ready to start. Okay, so we're ready to start priming. All sorts of primers on the market. Quite often I use Tamiya's fine surface primer, which I love for most jobs. It's great stuff. It dries silky smooth and really pulls down well into detail. There are a whole host of other kinds of primers and surfaces available. So you've got the Mistacolor 500, which is great for brushing on. We've got the Mistacolor 1000 primer surfacer here, and also Mistacolor, Mr. Surfacer 1200. Some other more recent ones are things like the Gianotis have done some surfaces as well. As this will be done with Mistacolor lacquers, I want to stick with one of the lacquer coats for this. So the choice largely that I'm making here is between the Mr. Surfacer 1200 and the 1000. The 1000 I haven't really tried yet. The Mr. Surfacer 1200 I have used and I know is a known quantity to me, so I'm going to use Mr. Surfacer 1200 for this. So I'm just going to flick my my airbrush on. Put some lacquer thinner through it. See if I can find the lid for it. Yeah, there's a lid, so I don't spill any. So this will be thinned back with Mistacolor or something similar. I've got some some Gianotis stuff here that I'm going to use to thin it because it'll work fine. This Gianotis stuff in particular is quite hot, so it can have a little bit of an effect on plastic, although not great. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to pour some of the Mistacolor 1200 into there. I think I'll probably put no, that'll be fine. And then I'm going to add some of the this stuff, some of the thinner. Give it a good old stir around. And we'll see how it's coming through the airbrush. Yeah, we've immediately got a good flow. Okay, so let's just put that out of the way. And all we're doing is we're spraying the model, the entire model, with the primer. Hope you can see how that's going on there. Okay. So my pressure isn't too high on this, it's just enough to get a good atomising spray through the airbrush. And then we can move over the model step by step. Ensuring we've got a good coverage over the whole model. As you can probably see, I hope you can see how the actual primer is going on. I'm being quite liberal with it. It's going on quite wet. However, it's as you can see by the tail there, it does dry in a very few seconds. So that's literally it. We'll work over the whole model, getting a good coat of primer down, which will help us to detect any areas that need any further work. And then when that's done, we can think about starting to actually get some real paint on it. Okay, so there's the there's a model actually finally sort of with the initial coat of primer on it. I'm seeing one or two areas that I have missed that I'll need to go back and recover. But that's why we prime models. So I'll in the next stage I'll go through those little small areas with you, and we can clean up the model and get it all ready and finally together, ready for adding things like the canopy and getting to the proper painting stage. So I'll see you then.